One thing is very clear. Vladimir Putin is one of the most controversial politicians in the world. He is idolized by some and hated by others. But what is for sure is that Putin's period in office is making its mark on international politics. The truth is that the government has achieved little in terms of economic and social matters under his leadership. However, his popularity among Russians remains really high. Today, in this video, we're going to analyze why Putin is quite so popular in Russia. So there's this Spanish saying that says, after the storm comes the calm. Well, when it comes to Russia, this is exactly what happens. After going through a tough crisis in the last few years due to the fall in oil prices, as well as the sanctions received from the international community for occupying Crimea, the government has been pretty blunt. The difficult times have passed and the Russian economy is back. But is it really? I mean, where's the evidence to really back this up? And tell me, what do you think Russian growth is expected to be in 2017? 12% maybe? 9? 5? 3? 2? No, well, it's actually predicted to be 1%.
Month after month, the Russian economy keeps growing. For 2017, we're expecting a growth of 1%, or even more. Igor Shuvalov.
That sure doesn't look like a lot. And that's bearing in mind that Russia is not exactly a rich country to begin with, and to be honest, that 1% is only if we believe the statistics of the Russian government, which, well, more and more analysts consider to be rather fictitious. The truth is that even though everything seems to indicate that the Russian economy is more stable, the last few years have not exactly been easy for the Russians. According to the Russian Social Security Institute, in the year 2016 alone, Russian citizens suffered from the biggest loss in purchasing power, that means real income, since the 1990s. Not a good thing.
The crisis and the depreciation of the ruble, the Russian currency, has led to this country with 145 million inhabitants to have a GDP that's similar to that of Australia, which only has a population of 23 million.
And what's even worse is that for now, it doesn't look like the situation is going to improve. So here we come to the Great Russian Anomaly, evidence which shows that this country is very different from any other. Neither the crisis nor the terrible economic conditions have damaged the national popularity of Vladimir Putin. In fact, Putin's popularity is today higher than it's pretty much ever been. According to polls from the Levada Center, Putin's approval rating among the Russian population is almost 80%. And now have a look at this. But now you might be wondering, how is this even possible? Why is this man immune to such a crisis? Well, let's have a look at just what is happening.
The protective father.
When discussing the Russian economy, it's pretty much mandatory to talk about oil and raw materials. And here are two pieces of information so you can get an idea of just how dependent Russia is on these resources.
Before the fall in the prices of crude oil and natural gas meant a lot to the Russian economy. 70% of the country's exports and more than 50% of all income of the Russian government came from these two commodities.
And take a look at the evolution of the price of oil during the years Putin has been in office. So anyway, well, Putin, he was incredibly lucky. Right after he reached power, the price of oil, which had remained stable around $20 a barrel for the last 10 years, started to increase quickly. And of course, this meant an amazing flow of money coming into the country. Just so you can get an idea of how significant this was, the share the government contributed to the economy rose from 35% to 70%. All of a sudden, prosperity came to the entire nation. There were cranes everywhere, skyscrapers started to appear as if they were mushrooms after the rain, and the standard of living for Russians went up and up and up. Yeah, so it is true that Putin's authoritarianism could be felt right from the very beginning, but I mean, so what? Who cares? The money was flowing. Okay, so we could say that there was this sort of agreement between Russian society and their leader. In exchange for not asking about civil liberties or corruption, the government gave prosperity and stability to the citizens. In a way, Putin became some sort of protective father to the nation, a tough but capable father who was able to take care of his children. But as always, the problem is that these situations are fragile. No government, not even Putin's, has the capacity of achieving this prosperity all on its own. With such high oil prices, Putin didn't conduct any reforms in Russia. I mean, what would really be the point? And because of that, when the price of oil started to go down in the summer of 2014, the economy of Russia followed the same pattern. And it is here that we come to the most interesting part of this story. None of these things affected Putin's popularity. The Russian president knew, for want of a better word, how to recycle his earlier strategy. If at the beginning he was the guardian of prosperity, now he would become the leader who would recover the previous great influence that Mother Russia used to have.
Nationalist fervor.
So, if Russia's economy wasn't having their best moments, well, he had to look for another source of popularity, and Putin, well, he knew where to find it. For 500 years, Russia's foreign policy was all about expanding its influence. Since the times of Ivan the Terrible around the 14th century, Russia expanded its territory on average 80 square kilometers a day, until it became by far the largest country on Earth, as well as the most powerful. However, after the fall of the Soviet Union, the influence of Russia on the world collapsed. So Putin made a new promise, and it could be summarized like this. It may not be a prosperous country and the economic situation may be bad, but I, Vladimir Putin, will recover Russia's influence in the world. You may not be a wealthy people, but your nation will be strong. But in order to make this strategy work, some things are necessary. The first of them is to praise nationalist sentiment, and this means, well, Russia, Russia, and more Russia.
Vladimir Putin unveils statue of medieval namesake who united Russian lands.
By the way, following these same ideals are the recurring adverts of new invincible weapons, incredibly powerful ones which will guarantee Russia gains great status and global supremacy. First of all, though, an important question is going to be whether the Russian government can actually afford these weapons. The second necessary thing is rather more sinister, and that's going to be for Russia to find an enemy. This enemy is something that can push Russians towards a common goal. Let me explain that a little further. Russia, they need a threat, they need an aggressor, they need something for the Russians to unite against. And in order to achieve that, Putin requires an aggressive foreign policy. The Ukrainian crisis, the accusations against NATO, and the occupation of Crimea are all examples that have made Putin's popularity rise again. In the eyes of the Russians, Putin is taking Russia back to its previous grandeur. This second strategy can explain the busy schedule of Russian diplomacy in the last few years. They may not have much money, but Moscow is everywhere. Ukraine, Syria, North Africa. And hey, to be honest, the sanctions the international community have imposed on Russia have had kind of the opposite effect that was intended. They have been seen by the Russians as humiliating, and if they've had any effect, it was to consolidate popular support for Vladimir Putin.
74% of Russians consider the sanctions to be an intention to weaken and humiliate Russia. Only 5% think of them as an instrument to stop the conflict in Ukraine, Levada Center.
And last of all, for Putin, it is necessary for him to consolidate the image of a strong, determined leader, almost a national hero, something of a savior, if you will.
There is no Russia today if there is no Putin.
So, these are the keys in understanding why Vladimir Putin has been able to keep and even increase his popularity. He is no longer the guardian of prosperity, but the leader who will regain the power that Russia once had.
CRONY capitalism.
Another decisive matter to be considered is that Putin's government also survives because he has been able to create a network of powerful oligarchs around him who have grown rich thanks to the resources of the Russian state. Government aid, large state contracts, and Putin's commitment to replace imports have all benefited these oligarchs.
Putin's former judo partner awarded contract to build a Russian bridge to Crimea. It'll cost more than $3 billion.
Besides, Putin has a backup plan in case things go awry. He can privatize, or more accurately, just give state companies away to these oligarchs who will use their power and money to further Putin's interests. The Russian president has made it clear only strategic investors will be allowed to participate in privatizations, and that means only investors who have been selected by the Russian government.
Iron fist.
And lest we forget, the repression. Political repression and the repression of minorities seems to be kind of a fetish for dictators and potential dictators. I mean, just take a look at the last report from Amnesty International on human rights in Russia. It's pretty sad.
Restrictions on rights to freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly increased in 2016.
Well, now we all know the ingredients that explains Putin's popularity: nationalism, oligarchs, censorship, and political repression. Putin has promised the people that they will become powerful again in exchange for their unconditional loyalty. However, despite all of this posturing, it does seem kinda unlikely that Russia is going to be able to seriously compete with either China or the US in the medium and the long run. But that's our opinion here at VisualPolitik, and as always, we'd love to know what you think. Do you think Putin will be successful in giving Russia its old power back? And what would you prefer? National power, or maybe well-being, prosperity, and freedom? We definitely know what we'd want, but we'd like to know what you would like. Drop us a comment below this video and let us know your thoughts. And, well, if you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up below, and do not forget to subscribe. We put out brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday. And please don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast, who provided the voice in this video that, well, isn't mine. And, as always, I'll see you in the next episode.